Picture this. The year is 450 AD. The Western Roman Empire, that ancient titan that once commanded the known world, is dying. Not the dramatic death of a warrior cut down in his prime, but the slow, agonizing decline of something once magnificent, rotting from within, hemorrhaging territory, watching its glory slip through trembling fingers. In the imperial capital of Ravenna, behind marble walls and locked doors, a letter arrives. The wax seal breaks, and when the words are read aloud, every man in that room understands. Everything is about to change. The letter is from Attila the Hun, and he is asking for a bride. To understand why this proposal sent shockwaves through the halls of power, you have to understand what Attila represented to the Roman world. He wasn't just another barbarian king hammering at the gates. He was something altogether different, something worse. By 450, Attila had already carved his name into the flesh of Europe. From the steppes of Central Asia, the Huns had swept westward like a plague, a confederation of nomadic warriors who moved with terrifying speed, who struck without warning, who showed no mercy. They were horsemen without equal, archers who could loose arrows at full gallop, fighters who seemed to materialize from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. To the Romans, who had built their empire on discipline and formation and the steady tramp of legionary boots, the Huns were chaos incarnate. And Attila, he was their king, their warlord, the man the Romans would come to call Flagellum Dei, the Scourge of God, a title that tells you everything you need to know about how they saw him, not as a human adversary but as divine punishment made flesh, a force of nature, an apocalypse with a face. He'd already brought the Eastern Roman Empire to its knees, extracting tribute payments so massive they'd bankrupted Constantinople's treasury. He'd turned proud kingdoms into vassals. He'd made emperors beg. And now, impossibly, he wanted something more. He wanted Honoria. Princess Justa Grata Honoria, sister to Valentinian III, Emperor of the West. A woman born into the purple, raised in the gilded cage of imperial privilege, taught from birth that her bloodline made her semi-divine. She was Rome's daughter, and Attila wanted her as his wife. But here's where the story gets complicated. Because Honoria, in an act of either desperation or cunning that historians still debate, may have wanted him too. Let's rewind. Honoria was not a woman without agency, even in a world that granted women precious little of it. She'd been caught in an affair with her chamberlain, a scandal that threatened the dignity of the imperial household. Valentinian, her brother, had responded with the heavy hand of authority. He'd had her lover executed, sent Honoria to a convent, and arranged for her to marry a senator of his choosing. A safe, controllable, utterly powerless husband. Trapped, humiliated, stripped of autonomy, Honoria must have felt the walls closing in. And so she did something extraordinary, something insane. She smuggled a letter and her signet ring to Attila himself. The details are murky. History often is when it comes to the private thoughts of women in the ancient world. But the message was clear enough. She was offering herself. Whether as a genuine proposal of marriage or simply as a plea for rescue, we'll never truly know. But Attila received that ring, and he saw opportunity written in gold. He declared that Honoria was his betrothed, and more than that her dowry should be nothing less than half the Western Roman Empire. You have to imagine the scene in Ravenna when this demand became known. The emperor's advisors, those aging men who'd spent their careers managing decline, suddenly facing something unprecedented. Attila wasn't demanding tribute. He wasn't threatening another raid. He was claiming legitimacy. He was saying that through marriage to imperial blood, he had a right to Rome itself. This was existential terror dressed up as a wedding proposal. Because think about what it meant. If Attila married Honoria, he wouldn't just be a barbarian at the gates anymore. He'd be family. He could claim to rule not as a conqueror, but as a legitimate co-emperor. His sons would have Roman blood. The carefully constructed fiction that separated civilization from barbarism, Roman from Hun, would collapse. The empire's identity, already fraying, would be torn to shreds. Valentinian refused, of course. Flatly, desperately, absolutely. He declared the engagement invalid. He insisted Honoria was already betrothed to another. He marshaled every legal and diplomatic argument available, but none of it mattered because Attila didn't care about Roman law. He cared about Roman territory. The proposal was never really about love or even about Honoria herself. It was about legitimacy, about giving a veneer of righteousness to what was coming next. Invasion. In 451, Attila moved. He gathered the largest army of his career. Huns, yes, but also Goths, Gepids, Alans, Franks. A tide of warriors from dozens of tribes, all united under his banner. And he pointed them west, toward Gaul, toward the heartland of what remained of Rome's power. The Romans, desperate, did something they'd once have considered unthinkable. They allied with their former enemies. Visigoths who'd sacked Rome just decades earlier now fought alongside Roman legions. This wasn't noble cooperation. It was survival. Everyone understood that if Attila won, there'd be nothing left for any of them. They met at Catalonian plains in what is now France, and there, in the dust and blood of late afternoon, they fought. Cavalry charges that shook the earth, hand-to-hand fighting so savage that corpses were said to be piled in heaps. The Visigothic king Theodoric fell in battle. Thousands died on both sides. When darkness fell, neither army could claim clear victory, but Attila, for the first time anyone could remember, withdrew. He'd been stopped. Not destroyed, not defeated, but stopped. The wedding proposal that terrified an empire had led to one of the great battles of the ancient world, and Rome, barely, had survived. But the story doesn't end there. The next year, Attila tried again, invading Italy itself. He sacked cities, burned fields, pushed toward Rome. Only plague, famine, and a diplomatic mission led by Pope Leo convinced him to turn back. And then in 453, Attila died, suddenly, mysteriously, on his wedding night to yet another bride. Some say it was a nosebleed while drunk. Others whisper murder. His empire, held together by his will alone, shattered almost immediately. Honoria disappears from the historical record. We don't know if she ever regretted that ring she sent, that desperate gambit that nearly destroyed what remained of her world. We don't know if she understood the chaos she helped unleash, or if she felt any satisfaction in watching her brother scramble to contain it. What we do know is this: her proposal and Attila's response to it revealed just how fragile Rome had become. How close to the edge. The empire would limp on for another generation in the West, but the cracks were everywhere now, impossible to ignore. Today, we remember Attila as a barbarian, a destroyer, a force of elemental rage. And there's truth in that. But he was also something more cunning, a politician who understood power, legitimacy, and the weaknesses of his enemies. That marriage proposal wasn't just about desire or even conquest. It was about revealing to the world that Rome could no longer defend its own dignity, its own women, its own identity. The proposal terrified an empire because it held up a mirror, and Rome saw itself dying in the reflection. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a sword. Sometimes it's a ring, smuggled across enemy lines, and the ambition to turn it into a crown.